Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So you see that's dated in 1774, looking for this Muhammad. And it describes this Muhammad. Here, during the colonial and the Revolutionary War, we find a few people, at least 6 people that had Islamic names. One, Yusuf bin Ali, became known as Joseph bin Heli. His family lived in Sumter, South Carolina. Some of the descendants still live there today. There was a Babbitt Muhammad, who was a corporal in Virginia, listed in Revolutionary War records. Peter Salim and Salim Poor, we know about their history as African American Revolutionary War heroes. They American language, they say Salem, but if you look in the dictionary, the word is Salim, and the root word is Arabic. Then there's also two names, Francis Saba and Joseph Saba. Then in the War of 1812, there was the brother Bilal Muhammad, who told the slave master, said that I got 80 men to help defend this island. I can't count on the other slaves that you own. And this was on Sapo Island in the War of 1812. There was also two other brothers that was listed. One was named Jacob Amin. He was a private in the company, in the Norfolk military. And then also there was a John Hameen, who was a corporal in the Company 4 Regiment out of Virginia. Then the first time we seen the name Bilal was with that brother Bilal we talked about in the War of 1812. There's reports, there's a few books out. Philip Curtin did a book, Africa Remembered, and he describes within his book about Bilal Muhammad being a plantation manager of over 450 people on the island Sapo Island. And it talks about the story on Sapo Island of the War of 1812 and a great time during the war of a hurricane period. And Bilal Muhammad saved people. Then there was another personality that was also plantation manager, and his name was Salih Bilal. He lived on St. Simon Island in Georgia. And the St. Simon Island is the same island where that sheriff and his son killed Amadou. That was early plantation area where Muslim came from. Now that Muslim leader that I talked about, Bilal Muhammad, this is Arabic writing. He wrote a 13-page script that they called a Risala, which is a letter. Some people in American language, they call it the Diary of Ben Ali. But he instructed the community how to pray, how to fast, how to do holistic living, and how to remember Ramadan. And so this tells his story. This is on Sapo Island in there. And in that community, this is in the community, they build houses out of sand, seashells, and limestones. These are some of the tombstones in the cemetery. You see, had the name Benna, which means daughter. She died in 1924. Here they use a star. Here, I find very unique. Here you see the tombstone with the one finger on it, and his name is Sambo Swift. He died in 1884. Now, this tombstone was found in the cemetery on Route 99 in between the two Bilalis. And I pointed out earlier about the story about Bilal ibn Rabah and Prophet Muhammad when he was tortured and enslaved. He was a believer in God. He was a believer in oneness. All he could say was Ahad, Ahad, Ahad. But he couldn't say that no more. He put up the one finger. There's one God. Well, in between these two Bilals in American history is where I found this tombstone with that one finger. And we find these tombstones from the tip of Florida in Jacksonville, Florida, where the heavy Gullah population was, all the way up to Canada. And out west, far west as Kansas. These tombstones we found not only amongst African-American Muslims, but even immigrant Muslims. And if you go back and look at the history books about tombstones in America, they say that they believe that it means pointing up to heaven. But if you look at all tombstones, it represents somebody's belief. You see a cross, a Jewish symbol, even different type of religious symbol, a Masonic symbol, our fellow symbol, something that represents their faith. A Muslim in their prayers and belief, they believe in one God. Even right now in American sports, if the team win, they put on a big glove and say, we're number one, we're number one. So that concept of the oneness of God existed. And we found these tombstones all throughout. Here is a closer picture of Bilal Muhammad's book, written what they call a jammy script, even though it's Arabic. Uh, 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 it's done with African words and African dialect. And for me, they told us that we couldn't read and write. This validates we could read and write when we came here. They couldn't understand what we could read and write. There's churches that has this writing on it. There's other letters that was written. So we could read and write. We had a history. We had a culture. This is the other Sally Bilali, in there. And there's Jim Brown comes from this community. Robert Abbott, who started Chicago Defender newspaper, he's descended from this family. And this family, and up to 1941, they still carried the name Bilali. He brought to some parts of the property in July in 1941, and pardon me, 1914 is when he brought it. And this talks about the story, and they call it the Bilali Sullivan estate. And they report that there was no Europeans. You look at it, there was no European that had owned anybody or even lived in that area with the name Sullivan. The reports now that I've heard is that really was Suleiman. His name was Valley Suleiman, is what he identified his name in. And here, this is now, the valley then was in 1800, 1812. Now this is 1847, 1857. They're still giving them Islamic names while they was enslaved. You see Ishmael, Abidir. Okay, this Barkis is probably Bakir. Same thing as what I would believe. Here, because you see Fatima, you see Adam. This Billy was probably Bilal. You see a Fatima. Here you got a Muhammad, Mahomed, 17. They price him at a value of 350. Here you see Benner, 39, at the age of 39, valued 39, $350 or $300. Here you see them spelling Bilali. You see another young man, Bilali. Here you see another Mohammed, age 25, value at $500. His wife named Member. Here they say Jedifa in some West African language means one who slays a lion. Here you see another Fatima. Here's Aquila. Here you got Suleiman. And there's another name. There's also, you see Amirtha. And this is some of the same similarities, the same name that uh, 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 um, Harriet Tubman had, that what she was born with, Aminata. And that's the same Aminata as you look at what they call that story, uh, 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 the Book of the Negroes, about the Canadians, the Africans that came up out of the Gullah people from the Georgia area. They had that same name. Now here, this is a tombstone that is found up in Connecticut, pardon me, Maine. He died in 1906, if I'm not mistaken. He come from Albania. Here you see the name Bilalski, but you hear the root word is still Bilal. You see Bilali, Bilalski. Let you know the region that he came from. His name was Qasim Salih Bilalski. And so to still see this name Bilal transcend all throughout the United States and in all cultures. Here in 1950, in the 1850s, pardon me, there appeared a man in the census record. There appeared a man from Arabia that had the name Muhammad. He was living in California. And in 1850, there was another census record. This census record was about an freed African-American family. This is a free black family. Most black people didn't get their freedom to 1865. But they was living in Frederick, Maryland, where John Brown and all that stuff went on. And they was free. They was born free. A whole black family up in there. These are some of the census records. This is the 1850 census record out in California, 1850. His name is Muhammad. Age 22, work as a laborer from Arabia. Here's the other census record of this Muhammad. Her name is Margaret Muhammad. Matter of fact, she became known as Margaret Hagan Muhammad. And this is her family, Jeremiah Muhammad, Sarah Muhammad, and the other siblings, all listed as B. You see B listed as means black, and there's free people, free inhabitants. And this is in Frederick, Maryland. This is an 1850 census. This is one of the children of that first Jeremiah Muhammad. He was born in 1865. He was that young one, Jeremiah Muhammad. And now he spelled his name Mahammitt. He died in 1923. Now, some of his descendants still maintain carrying that name. There's records that you see that of people that had that name, Muhammad, up into the 60s. Some of them got arrested for protesting for a certain amount of rights, civil rights, and activities in that area. But this is descendant, Jeremiah Muhammad. And then the other spelling they do Mahammet. Here, this is another census. This is an 1870 census. His name is Bernard Muhammad. He came from Turkey, and he was living in Massachusetts in 1870. Here you see a census record, Muhammad, Bernard Muhammad. And he was not mistaken, this is 33 years old, and they listed him as black, as a laborer coming from Turkey. Now, during the Civil War, we had a guy named listed Adel Muhammad. He was a private in the Marines 11th Infantry up in Maine, probably in Maine. And he was also a prisoner of war. And then also during the Civil War, there was a Luke or El Muhammad. I'm not sure it was Luke, Lukman. I'm not sure what his first name was, but El Muhammad was a private in the Confederate Army in the Charleston Regiment. Then here, this is another census record in 1880, and this is in Wyoming, and this is a military base. Here you got a B.A. Muhammad, who he was a private, he was a soldier, came directly from Africa. His mother, father, everybody's born from Africa. You see him listed in the 1880 census records. Then in 1830, there was a town called Muhammad in Illinois, which was developed. And in the late 1850s, there was another town called Muhammad, Texas. They had a post office. Yeah, and that was led by a guy named August Muhammad. He was the postmaster of Muhammad, Texas by 1879. This is his town, Muhammad, Illinois. Now, some of the unique things about this town, one of the most unique things about this town, there's reports that Abraham Lincoln spent the night in this town. Now here, in that same town, you see tombstones with that one finger that I talked about earlier, even in this town. Now, many of the people in this town early on didn't want the name Muhammad. They tried to change it to Middletown. So in the cemetery, you see Middletown. In some other places, you'll see Middletown. But the highway sign is Muhammad. The public library is Muhammad. The grocery store is Muhammad. The administrative building is Muhammad. And there's reports that Abraham Lincoln spent the night in this town. And this is supposed to be a town where the Ben Ishmael tribe and some early Melungeons helped live and establish. Now, there was a gentleman that was born in that town, and he was traveling out in Texas. And while he was traveling out Texas, he saw that there was another town called Muhammad, Texas. And he stopped and looked, and the town had a post office from 1857 to 1916, led by a guy named August Muhammad. In here, like a lot of times, and this is in Texas, you hear that racism or that mentality that nativism, that we don't belong, that we was not cowboys. We wasn't. We was camel boys. And we helped establish towns in America. And one of the towns we see right there in Texas, in the heartland of Texas. And we was camel herders. We settled camels. The U.S. government brought 75 camels from all around the Muslim world to see what could go out west. You can see reports in the Senate reports, newspaper reports. There's so many stories about them and their journey out there. And one of the most famous personalities that come from those camel herders is Hajj Ali, which would have the nickname Hajj Ali. Now this here is a town called, and I think they pronounce it Medina. Mina or something. I don't know how they pronounce it, but it was Medina. It's Medina, Ohio, and lo and behold, Medina, Ohio had the first name. It was first name Mecca. Then somehow they changed back. It said originally called Mecca. Then they went back to the name Medina. So I don't care how they try to cover it up. Mina, Dinah, Mina, Dina. It's Medina, Medina. And they had that intent to talk about the birthplace of the religion of Islam. So these are some of the names that we see, of instance of just a town that have Islamic roots that has some type of connection with Muslim with the name Muhammad. Now in World War One, those 584 soldiers that, with the last name Muhammad, spelled 33 different ways. Now here you see Mohammed, but they had Maha, one M, two M's, ED, ET, one M, U. There's 41 different ways, and there's more than that, and then there's more than that. It was just 33 there. I counted up one point over 41 different ways. I'll show you a few more in a few minutes. In World War II, there was over 48 people that had the last name Muhammad that fought in the war. Now here, just in Connecticut, I come from Connecticut, so I put a little focus on Connecticut census. Here you got Bulu, which is probably Bilal, back here. Jamal Bilal, Usman or Osman Bilal, George William Bilal. And these are people that lived in Connecticut. Some was born in Albania. Harman Muhammad, Ali Muhammad. You see the spelling of different names. This Rafat Muhammad, Lamy Muhammad, Richard Muhammad, Ghani Muhammad. And these are live throughout New Haven, Waterbury, Trumbull, Hartford, different parts of Connecticut. This is early 20th century. Then in the census records, you got other Muslim names appear in census records. You got Usman Osman Muhammad. Uh, his name, 18 years old, coming from Turkey, in the United States. You got this Ali Muhammad, 40 years old, coming from Turkey. So you had that a wave of Muslims that came from the Ottoman, in the beginning of that Ottoman and fall of the Ottoman Empire, and different outskirts of that. You've seen this wave of them coming in. Another prior wave of Muslims coming in out of that area was Muslim coming from pre them was Muslim that came from the Levant, the Syrians and the Lebanese came prior to this wave of Muslims that you see that came in. And in 1920, census record, it was 14 people that had the last name Allah, coming from places like Turkey, Hungary, India, Greece, and Syria. 57 people had the last name Abdul. They was born in different places from Arabia, Oasis, Turkey, India, Syria, Arabia, Republic, Constantinople, Napoleon, Syria, East India, Egypt, Germany, England, Poland, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. There were so many places around and came from so many different regions. The census record is a great document, or a group of documents that highlight and points out early Muslim arrivals and looking at their records. Now, this other guy that I stopped at, this Muhammad Dusi Ali, um, he was really a Renaissance man during this time. Did a lot of great work in England, came over to the United States, did a lot of great work here in the United States. One of the things that he contributed amongst the African American community was that Marcus Garvey worked for him when he was in England. And he shared with Marcus Garvey some Islamic concepts, some Islamic ideas. And Marcus Garvey came up with the theme, one God, one aim, one destiny. And in some of the songs that they sang inside of their organization, the Garveyite organization, they had some of the songs had Islamic, had Allah in them, and some other Islamic concepts and verses in them. I found very unique. Muhammad Dusi Ali was there also at the opening of the first masjid that was built from the ground up in the Detroit area. And in 1921, this is them joining them in the Salah at that Juma. In the 1930 census, records, you got them going out in Nebraska, uh, uh, that greater area. You got this Charlie Abraham, born in Syria, Ali Talib, Muhammad Salih, Ahmed Dallas. You got this Muhammad Mustafa, Sulaiman Sama, Muhammad Haji. I'm not sure they changed this Haji to Harjel. I'm not sure, but this is what the name is spelled at that time. But you see the wave of them, even coming into California, three Mohammeds from India, and two other that only had one name, Mohammed, age 51. So you see the wave of them. And that was just me going through the census records, looking at the different forms of the spelling of the name Muhammad. Um, and then you find that even with the name in the 1930s, there was 6 people had the name Bilal. 3 was born in Alabama, and 3 was born in coming from Colorado, Albania, and Minnesota. Balance it out. There were 7 that was born. That had the people that had the name Hajj. 6 of them was born in Syria. 1 was born in New York. There was 10 people that had the last name Akbar. 71 people had the last name Salim. 215 people had the last name Salim with the I. 58 people with the last name Abdullah. 389 had the last name Ali. 1,048 people had the last name Hassan. There was 23 people with the last name Rashid. 111 people had the last name Rashid spelling with the Rahied versus the EED. 72 people had the last name Rahim. And this is in 1930. And so you got them mixed. Those that was born and those that came around. They came as immigrants, just like you see in the Quran with the story about Yusuf. There was those that Yusuf was captured and sold into slavery from his brothers out of jealousy, envy, and other reasons. But he rose up within that those trials and tribulations, rose up into the house of Pharaoh or house of Egypt in a position of a leadership and controlling once again the charity or the wealth. And then you had the other immigrants come through, like through immigration, like Musa. He was put in the crib or in the manger or in a little boat, and he came and was brought over here. His mother sought safety for him. And Eve grew up also as well, and then wound up in the house of Pharaoh in a leadership position, be able to communicate with him. And so we're both here in America, the house of Pharaoh, came through different doors, different vehicles. Now, another personality that helped bring the name Muhammad famous in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, and 60s, and the 70s was Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. They helped bring that consciousness of the name Muhammad, Allah, and Islam very popular. Elijah Muhammad produced Malcolm X, Lucius Bayard, Mahaworthy Muhammad Farrakhan, so many people across the board that he made men out of men. People call him the maker of men, the men that make men. He's also known for cleaning up people. They may not agree with his Akida, his right belief in God's system, but he's known for cleaning people up. And my experience with him, he said that I'm not here to clean you up. I'm not here to teach you your religion. I'm here to clean you up. The one that's going to come after me is going to clean you up. And I got to give him credit and respect for preparing that one. And he told us that one was his son Wallace. And he prepared him, educated him, nurtured him in that concept. And that when he came into that leadership, he brought us clear and pure Islam and gave us the Quran and gave us that same spirit of Bilal, of not taking bait with no one, stripping that relationship with yourself and the Quran and following the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad. So Islam. Now, going back with the Nation of Islam, the other thing that Elijah Muhammad brought focus about, encouragement about, was freedom, justice, and equality. Um, this is what they preached, you know, that Islam brought about justice, you know, human dignity, freedom, human freedom and human expression, human equality. This is what was their call, their attraction, along with brotherhood and unity and a few other things. And another personality that came through out of that community as well as became a world, a global hero, Muhammad Ali. I met a Canadian young man that's born out of Bangladesh, and he was so proud that he was named after Muhammad Ali. But we don't understand worldwide in the 70s and in the early late 60s when he was prominent. You know, he was a beacon of light with that name Muhammad Ali worldwide. You know, they didn't. There's a little black man in America, man, the House of Pharaoh talking about Allah's Akbar, Allah's greater. You know, and then fought the system. He said, "Look, I'm not going around to go fight for no one." He stood up on his value and his principle and his teacher, Elijah Muhammad. And then he became a world hero. He carried the Olympic torch, you know, to the point now that even when we saw when with the and a model that we heard during the time Black Lives Matter come, the sports figures. Many of them saw Muhammad Ali stand as their measuring stick, just like many people see Malcolm X stand as their measuring stick. You know, and this is that influence, that subtle or soft power for that human dignity, that human righteousness, that human stand. You know, that he had to weather many storms. And we seen that. They took his rights, ability to earn money, uh, 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 try to lock him up, you know, do everything. But he stood up in his belief system, you know, and that concept, surely I told myself to be Allah, trying to be upright, to lead the heavens, the creator of the heavens and the earth. I am not the polytheists. Surely my prayers, my sacrifice, my life, and my death were all for thee, Allah. He did that. He did that. And we saw in the end, Allah says, surely man get what he strives for. In the end, he was and he is today a living hero, a living model that they use as a model, as a measuring stick to move forward. And another man in our society is Mohamed Muhammad. He brought a transition. He moved millions of people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people into believing in the oneness of God and the true oneness of God. And then he also gave them that spirit, that concept, that Bilal of praying, of wudu, coming towards Allah, of bringing your consciousness and clarity of language, and that he strengthened the realization that you have a relationship with Allah. Once he freed us from the misconcepts, misperception of what his fathers taught. Once he freed us, we took on that same spirit that Bilal that was not going to be taken, following no one else. Concept, our relationship is going to be between Allah, following the guidance of the Quran, and the guidance of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says he's closer than us than our jugular vein. He don't need no intercessor, no imam, no priest, no sheikh, no one to have that relationship. Pray. None of the Prophet Muhammad had no one in front of them but Prophet Muhammad as an example. Their relationship was one-on-one with Allah in their prayers, doing good deeds and action. You know, now I'm going to, also take a look at some of, a lot of times people have a misperception of the Imam. But under his leadership, under Imam Muhammad's leadership, the community saw quickly 104% growth rate within 5 years of his leadership. The community grew from 81 places of worship or temples from 75 to 165 masjids in 1980. In 1977, when the community changed its name from temples to masjids, they had a 79% increased growth. from 83 temples to 149 masajids. And by 1982, the community under Imam's leadership grew to 208 masajids, which made it another 26% increase within 2 years. At that time of his passing, Imam Muhammad was known, when he passed, he was known as a renowned leader, and he became known as America's Imam. This is just some of the growth that we've seen under his leadership. Looking at the potentials. Now we take this information from Muhammad Speaks, Bilal News, all the papers, and all the transformation of their names. Now here I want to just point out a little bit. From 64 to 65, there's 26 temples. This is the period of time of Malcolm X, under Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, and their growth in that period. There's 26. Now, to take a real look at the growth between when Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm, is when then you get a better measuring stick how well it grew. We know by FBI reports and everything, they say that Elijah Muhammad told the FBI when they arrested him in 42 that he had 19 temples that he had acknowledged. Now, they did not have numbers, but he recognized 9 of them. But in 1960, they wasn't saying how many or where the temple was. There's that gap to look at. But we do know that at the end of Malcolm's time, there's 26 of them. And from Malcolm's time, after Malcolm's gone from 66 to 75, you had that growth. And you give that growth to Minister Farrakhan. Because he was the national representative and he was the face, the front, the energy, the motivation to help keep the growth of the community under that time. And people could question, however, but he was the recognized national representative. Now, from 76 to 1980, you see the growth to 165 census. This is 11 outside around the country, the Virgin Islands and overseas. That was all under Imam Muhammad's leadership and under his guidance at that time. So these are just some of the statistics of the records and of the growth and the development of Imam Muhammad under his time, under his leadership. Now, in closing about this, I wanted to also point out about the name Bilalian. This is an old newspaper article that came out of Muhammad Speaks, where Imam Muhammad was making an announcement, and identifying that we had, as an African American people or Hamitic people, was adopting the name Bilalian to identify. He identified Bilal ibn Rabah as a great personality to want to try to identify with, to move ourselves out of a color consciousness and move into a ethnic consciousness. And so he identified Bilal ibn Rabah as a great personality because his Islamic connection, his enslavement, and abuse, and then his role and position in the Islamic, under Prophet Muhammad sallallahu being a muezzin, being a giver of charity, so forth. So this Bilal, he said that we should call ourselves Bilalian at that point. And this is the paper that came out for years. So in the 1980 census, I think every 75 years, the U.S. government put out, releases the census records unless you have, I guess, a special permission. It would be great to see how many people listed themselves as identifying themselves ethnically as a Bilalian. I know myself, I registered as a Bilalian. Now, most recently, I met people that say their birth certificates say that they're Bilalians. There's a judge, a United States judge, that says that she's a Bilalian. And there's many people around that identify themselves as Bilalian. And I found that it was very unique, very striking for me when I heard through an interview of the brother from Dar es Salaam community take his stand, that Bilalian stand, that we are not going to take Bay out with no one, that they're going to follow, they're going to be the captain of their own ship, they're going to use their own rudder, they're going to have their own relationship with Allah. And I can understand that totally of that Bilalian spirit. So I will encourage us as a people to take another look at that name. Really, uh, 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 it's not a bad name to take a look at to identify with some characteristic traits, and they are healthy and positive, provide healthy and positive characteristic traits about us as a people. Now, in closing, this here is the last Muhammad, not the last, but the last of my presentation. His name was Chaplain. He was chaplain of the army. He was the first Muslim chaplain of the army, Abdul Rashid Muhammad, the first Muslim chaplain of the army. And this is his story. And it happened in 1974. Since then, once again, you know, I, he took on that leadership role, that Bilalian role, take on that leadership role, leading people to become engaged and involved. For those that it fits, coming to the military, and then he grew up and rose up in the military that became a Muslim chaplain. That he can help guide Muslims that have joined within that. This is my short presentation about the name of Mohammed Bilal within American history. I pray and I hope that it provided some insight and some appreciation what it provides, what our history offers, what our history tells. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to enter into your house, into your space, into your world, and to share with you a beautiful and a meaningful insight and richness that Muslims have not been not informed or something different, but we've been a part of American fabric. We're embedded in American history, embedded into American cities, embedded into American documents, embedded into American cemeteries, embedded into American fabric and American families, where your neighbors, your friends, your uncles, your grandpas, your fathers, your mothers, your aunts, your uncles, were your neighbors, were your human being, friend, American. Listen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.